Welcome to this special bonus episode of The Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike Muncer. As ever, I am your host. In this podcast, usually we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. However, we're bringing you a little bonus episode today to talk about a brand new horror movie out in cinemas that everybody is talking about, Longlegs, the new movie by Oz Perkins. This is a movie that has been hyped for a while. The marketing was pretty incredible, and it was kind of hyping it as the scariest movie of the last decade, and it will absolutely terrify you, blah, blah, blah. So we thought this is a good opportunity to maybe sit down and have an in-depth discussion of the film. And it will be a spoilerific discussion, just to warn you. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Longlegs, go and check out the movie before you listen to our episode. So later in the episode, I'll be joined by friend of the pod, Becky Darke, to discuss this film in depth. But first of all, here is my interview with the writer and director of Longlegs, Oz Perkins. Now, Oz Perkins started off life being Anthony Perkins' son, which is pretty cool, right? Then he went into acting. He was in films like Legally Blonde randomly before he moved into horror directing. He made I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House in 2016. He made The Black Coat's Daughter. He made Gretel and Hansel in 2020. These are all really eerie, interesting, atmospheric movies. And now his biggest movie to date, Longlegs, which is produced by and starring Nicolas Cage, has so much buzz around it. I sat down and chatted to Oz about making the film, some of his key influences, and what he was hoping to achieve with this mad, bonkers, unique horror movie. Enjoy.
The letter was left with the bodies. We have 10 letters like it over the past 30 years. And all of them signed with one word: Longlegs.
Hello, Oz. How are you doing?
Pretty well, Mike. How are you?
Really good, thank you. Really good. Just wondered if you could just start by just telling us a little bit about the origins of this story. Tell us about Longlegs and kind of how the seed of this idea kind of grew for you.
It came out of, sort of the genuine desire to make a picture that more people would see. And you start with that intention. You try to get out of your own sort of preciousness a little bit, and you sort of look around at things that have worked. And I just felt like Silence of the Lambs was a thing that was such a beloved, perfect little jewel of a thing. And there hadn't been a great one like that in a long time. And so, geez, what if I actually just pretended I was doing that for a while and kind of wrote a movie that felt like it was just going to be that. And then it was really not that at all. And I think that when you can build yourself some sort of internal momentum that way, being like, oh, it's a trick. It's a little bit of a trick I'm going to do. It gives you places to go with it. It gives you places where you can kind of pivot off of things. And you've got your central kind of spine. You've got your central inspiration, your kind of guiding light. And then from there, that's when you're able to really get into what you want to do. So it sort of just came out of that. And then you just start sitting down in front of it every day and you wish for the best.
That's really interesting. So do you mean that sort of in your previous movies, The Black Coat's Daughter and the other work that you've done, is it that those movies hadn't quite reached a sort of mainstream enough audience compared to what you wanted at the time?
No, I don't even know that I was trying for a larger audience at the time. I think, The Black Coat's Daughter was the first thing that I'd ever done of any form of anything. Like I'd never made a music video or a student film or a short or a commercial or anything like that. Like when I sat down to direct The Black Coat's Daughter, that was the first time I'd ever done that. And so you don't know anything. You really don't know. You're like a 5-year-old. You have or a 20-year-old. You have no fucking idea what you're doing. And so luckily in that picture, I knew a lot of what I thought it should be. And I was making movies I thought I would like. And like I had good collaborators and, a lot of it just, you get lucky. So I don't know that I had felt like I'd missed it previously, but it did feel like it was time to just sort of do something a little bit more accessible. Wouldn't it be fun to try to do something a little more accessible?
Mm-hmm. I love that because I think you're right. On the face of it, right, you've got this setup, this kind of Silence of the Lambs-esque kind of serial killer procedural movie. But then actually, what we get, once it's kind of gone through the Oz Perkins filter, it feels like we actually get something a lot more complex than that. This is a film that feels like it's so much more about that dread, about that atmosphere, about something kind of more almost evil, right, lurking around the edges of this story. Was that kind of there for you on the page when you were writing it, or did that kind of come later when you were kind of creating the visuals and bringing the story to the screen?
I try to put as much onto the page as I can. It's a natural state for me, to sort of write too much, I suppose you would say, or write more than maybe the typical screenplay allows. Screenplays, as you know, can sometimes be terribly prescriptive and sort of like interior. Okay, now we know the trucks need to be prepared to be inside. Okay, it becomes very kind of antiseptic in a weird way. So I don't write scripts like I don't write slug line headings. I don't say interior, exterior. I don't say things like that. So just trying to get as much on the page about what the thing feels like, what characters are thinking. I write thoughts a lot. I don't know why everybody doesn't write that. It seems elemental that you would give that clue to all of the departments, because if you've got a good production designer, they're thinking, what's the character thinking? I'll put that in the environment. So it starts with that, and then you just try to hire people who you think have good taste and who want to win and who want to do cool work for you and want their contribution to shine. And you get to that place in a movie where you realize everybody's trying for the same thing. Everybody's trying to make a cool thing that they can be proud of. And one of the sort of primary sort of tasks of the film director is to let people do that.
This movie really has it's a truly kind of scary, sort of terrifying, oppressive atmosphere, and it's something that I found with so much of your work. I found this with The Black Coat's Daughter too. This kind of like really kind of dread-inducing atmosphere. What is the secret for you in kind of creating a really effective scare or a kind of scary environment for an audience? Do you think?
I don't know. To be like truly honest with you, I don't know. I just in setting about a scene or a look or a light color temperature or a costume on someone, you just try to trust your taste. It's such an amorphous thing to even put into the universe to say something like that, but you got to make decisions and guesses, right? It's all guesses and decisions. And so how atmosphere, you can't write it, you can't even really shoot it. You gotta find it, and you find it through the collaboration of all the people who do it. You find it in the editing room where everything really happens, where the only really like true experience of the movie is in the editing room. And so everything else is kind of walking around in the dark trying to find a light. In the editing room, you kind of, oh, it's that, oh, it's this. I see now. I thought it was something else, but it's this. And and for me also really important is to come at the stuff that you're doing with oblique references. There was never like, we said Silence of the Lambs, we established that. Okay, we know what that means and we can kind of go into automatic pilot with that. But then it was never like, well, have you seen this horror movie or this horror movie or this horror? Not interesting. We're going to end up with something generic and derivative and sort of obvious or something. So for me and my director of photography, it was more like, let's watch the movies of Gus Van Sant. Let's look at Uncle Boonby who can recall his past lives. Let's look at other things that are like far out, man, because if you go far out within the confines of the Silence of the Lambs, if you start talking about Gus Van Sant in Silence of the Lambs, you're like, what if Gus Van Sant made Silence of the Lambs? You start to get something that's sort of useful. That's kind of sort of, you can kind of do something with it, but you can't get into like, what if James Wan made Silence of the Lambs? You just wouldn't say that. I wouldn't.
Yeah. I got some, maybe it's just that atmosphere, but I got quite a lot of Lynch, like a kind of Lynchian dread. Was that ever kind of in your mind when you were creating this?
Yes, it's in my mind all the time. Like when you're trying to create stuff, you're absolutely trying to siphon off of the power of the great ones, right? You're not trying to siphon off the power of the lousy ones. People are like, I watch bad movies to learn. don't watch bad movies to learn. Watch Eraserhead 10 times in a row if you want to learn something. Do you know what I mean? Like actually take the time to watch the new Twin Peaks, the one that was on Showtime. Like actually do
Mhm.
that. There's better stuff in that than anything. So yeah, Lynch is one of the big baddies for me.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there's that kind of feeling of anticipation, and I got that in the cinematography too. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the look of this film because it feels like you play really interestingly with the aspect ratio and the use of kind of space too, kind of empty space, I suppose. Like, tell me a little bit about those kind of like visual decisions you made.
Well, we wanted to distinguish the time periods, and I think a lot of, just the opportunity to shoot on negative as opposed to shooting digitally was compelling to us. So we shot the 70s stuff on negative in the 4:3 aspect ratio, which is again just an exciting way of seeing things. And it's making its little comeback now, and you sort of see it in some things, and sort of Saltburn kind of does, like there's a lot of kind of great looking movies that employ that aspect ratio. But for Andres, the DP, and I, it was about, for me, observational is more an observational camera as opposed to a rushing camera is more it marinates the thing in a different way, right? And headroom for the actors is something that I take for granted. I can't imagine framing an actor like this in a frame. Like to me, this doesn't look like anything. Everybody does it. And you have to kind of, when you get a new DP, you kind of have to be like, actually, I think it's that. Because if it's this, there's a whole bunch of shit here. There isn't, but everything that's real is invisible, right? So everything that's invisible above their head is an actual thing. And it just makes a better feeling. We liked the look of VHS because we did, because it's pretty to us. We like the look of brown VHS. So one day Andres came to me, he's like, I think the LUT for the camera should be VHS. It's like a VHS kind of look. And I said, that sounds great. Let's do it. Check. Done. Good. Do the next thing. Not let's talk about it for 10 hours and wonder about it. But that sounds good. Let's do that. And then using the observational camera that stays back, for me, just it puts the audience in a helpless place, right? You can't reach out and help the person. You can't stop the thing that's happening over there. It's too far away, right? It's over there. You're observing this terrible thing. You can't stop it. To me is much more calming in a weird way. It's more comfortable as an experience than in even in a horror movie than being really like up in shit. If you're up in stuff, there's like it just feels cramped to me. I don't like it. It's ugly, and I just try to do things that I think are nice, man. Do you know? Like I just make things I think look right.
I love that. It would make a really. I know I've started to realize there's almost like this kind of sub genre of horror where you've got Michael Monroe potentially being pursued by something in the frame with her, right? Like I always think of, It Follows, but then even Watcher, and it feels like Micah herself is becoming like a stamp of approval for these kind of beautiful, creepy, stylish horror movies that she's in. Tell me a little bit about the casting of her and working with her in this film.
She's got a very laconic presence on camera. In real life, she's very active and talkative and sort of dynamic and kinetic. Um, but on camera, she's like a study in stillness, right? She's like a study in this like deep, sober, serious thing happening, and you can see it all happening. You don't know what it is, but it's all behind her eyes and behind her face, and she's not indicating a lot of things. She's not histrionically kind of like donating a bunch of verisimilitude and bullshit. It's very reserved, and you gotta go at her, and that creates the same kind of distance I'm talking about with the observing camera. Is that it creates a vessel, right, for shit to flow into it. Um, like Steve McQueen was always like, I don't want to say all this dialogue. I'll give the dialogue away, like in Bullet. He's like, other people can say the dialogue. I'll just listen. Because when the camera's on me and I'm listening, that's when I'm doing my best work. I'm not talking, I'm listening. And the audience will be like, what's he thinking? Um, it just engages things and makes things more dynamic. For me, she's a very dynamic actress in her minimalism.
And then, of course, offset against that, you've got the great Nick Cage. Tell me a little bit about kind of working with Nick. He also produced the film, right, as well. Tell me a little bit about that process of working with Nick.
Um, look, man, just every once in a while, good things happen, right? Every once in a while, a no becomes a yes, and all of a sudden everything's different. And you've got this part, and you think it's pretty good, you think the writing's pretty good, you can kind of see what it is, and then Nicolas Cage gets it, and then your producer calls and says Nicolas Cage wants to do it, and then it's like it's really disorienting, right? Like it's an immediately insane thing to even be thinking about is happening. And then you get on the phone with him and you realize you like the same things. You have a lot in common. You feel the same way about stuff. You feel safe and confident around him. He wants to do just the words that are written. He doesn't want to make stuff up. He doesn't want to improvise. He doesn't want to riff. He just wants to do the text. So now you're puffed up, your confidence is good, you're feeling comfortable so you can relax. Nick creates a really beautiful, relaxing environment for me because he's a finely tuned uh, instrument, right? He's like a beautiful tiger or a Stradivarius violin or both. And he's just gonna do it. And he knows everything, reads everything, can access everything, knows every performance given by actors, has seen every movie, knows every line of dialogue, knows every quote from every song. Um, you don't get to be Nicolas Cage by being just all right, do you know? So it was as good as you would want it to be.
Was it okay? How did you find actually directing him? Like, did you have to give him notes? Was he okay with that? Like, how was that dynamic?
He's absolutely okay with it because he exists for the service of the movie, right? He's such a movie guy. He for him movies are the great gift of living are movies. So he wants the movie to be good.
Mm.
He's not about like will Nicolas Cage be good? It's about will the movie be great? And so everything he's doing is in service of that. He's approachable. He doesn't want to like in the case of this when he's really submerged into a character and he's hidden and his makeup and all this stuff like he's really in it. He doesn't want to hang out. He doesn't want to have dinner. He doesn't want to meet the crew. He doesn't want to meet the producers. He doesn't want to meet the other actors. But in between takes, he talks to me like Nicolas Cage, right? I don't have to like weed through some method thing where like, oh, I got to talk to him like he's Andy Kaufman now. Okay, I'll figure it out. He's Nicolas Cage and he's available and he wants to have a good time. He likes to laugh. Um, and he's a legend for good reason.
He's a big performer, right? As well. Like, was that ever an issue for you in kind of that fitting that Nick Cage performance with the tone that you were after for this film? Like, did you ever have to rein it in with him a little bit?
No, because for me the tone is it's fun. For me, Longlegs is fun. Like I know people are taking it on very like it's very scary, it's very intense, it's very scarring. I'm never gonna sleep again. Great. Not necessarily my intention. I'm happy, I'm fine with it, but also not my problem, right? Like how people react, not my problem. For me, it's just joyful. And so when you have someone who wants to play as much as Nick does and give as much as he wants to give, just take it. No, I don't. If you see something in any aspect of the movie that you feel is too much or too little, just take it out.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do.
And finally, how have you found the reaction? You know, you mentioned at the beginning you wanted to make a movie that would reach an audience that more people would see. People are talking about this movie, right? Everywhere. How have you found the kind of the reaction to be to this movie so far? And have you yourself experienced it with big audiences yet at this point?
I've watched it with audiences and it's really gratifying. People really like it. People really get it. They really think it's funny in the places where I think it's funny. They seem genuinely surprised by the turns in it. They don't see the things coming. They don't see the twists. They don't see the truths. They don't see the thing. So that's super, really incredibly gratifying. To get great reviews and stuff, I'm not gonna like it's amazing. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't care or like I don't. I'm really trying hard not to care, but it's hard not to care when as artists, I think we crave approval and mirroring and validation. All the things that make when we wanted when we were kids, little kids, we still want them. So it's nice. And I got to hand it to Neon. If it wasn't for my partnership with Neon, I don't know what this would be like. but they've taken on the movie in such a really intelligent, sophisticated way. They really care about presenting this thing. And I think the effect of that is immeasurable.
Fantastic. Well, Osgood Perkins, thank you so much for your time. I absolutely loved the movie. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, man.
The amazing Osgood Perkins there. Okay, let's get into our thoughts on Longlegs. This is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. We're going to be talking about the movie in depth from beginning to end. So joining me to discuss Longlegs, one of my very good friends and friends of the pod, it's the one and only Becky Darke. Hello, Becky.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. We were just saying before we started recording that we're both tired because it's too hot at night, and I keep waking up like ridiculously early and then not being able to get back to sleep. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, why am I sleeping so badly? It might be because I've watched Longlegs twice in 1 week.
That could be it.
Yeah.
That could be it.
Might be.
Why am I having such mental weird dreams? That could be it.
Yeah. You know how because I keep waking up really early and then I'll like fall back asleep and then I will have bonkers dreams, like really kind of fucked up and crazy. And I don't know if my dreams are always weird or if they're weirder in the morning or if it's just because it's in the morning, it means that I can remember them better. But like I had one yesterday morning that was like the worst body horror dream that you could possibly imagine. It was like all genitals and teeth. Like it was
Jesus.
It was bad. And sort of like woke up but it was quite good.
I wonder what a psychiatrist would make of that.
Yeah, I don't know. This is why I don't speak to psychiatrists anymore because I freak them out.
Yeah.
They don't have enough time for me. Yeah. But and then like it kind of like I had that thing where I like forced myself awake because I was like, that's enough of that dream. Thank you. I think I'll just wake up and be in the real world for a bit. But yeah, I think Longlegs probably has quite a bit to do with it because that's a weird film, isn't it?
It's so weird. It is like being in a nightmare at times, right? In the best possible way. So this is the film that like I feel like so many people have been waiting for this year, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like the marketing campaign and all the talk and the buzz around it, it's been like the movie that so many people have been literally counting down for. And I feel like since it came out last week as well, I don't know if you found this, but my kind of timelines are just filled with kind of Longlegs reactions, Longlegs hot takes, Longlegs theories, so it does seem to be the film that people are getting most excited about, right? How long had the movie kind of been on your radar? Were you very excited for this one as well?
So excited. Yeah, definitely one of my most anticipated. Just as you say, just like everybody really, I feel like this has really kind of loomed large over like the horror community for months and months. And the marketing, like a lot has been spoken about the marketing. And, that has been like a really kind of interesting and quite ingenious marketing campaign. So these like really kind of mysterious and like evocative posters and then sort of teaser trailers and then the trailer. I didn't watch the trailer. I obviously saw like all the posters and stuff, but I was so determined to go into this film knowing as little as possible. And I feel like the marketing really helped with that actually, because it was very sort of enigmatic.
Yeah.
And then, the buzz does start when people do start seeing it and all the pull quotes and stuff. And obviously it has been, it's been kind of cited as being like one of the most terrifying movies of the decade and stuff like that. And that's always a slightly dicey.
It's a double-edged sword,
it's a double-edged sword. It is. This year's Hereditary, like that kind of thing. And so I did want to kind of go in knowing as little as possible and kind of in terms of the details. But then, of course, like anticipation was high. So, yeah, like I was excited to finally see it, definitely.
So, so you finally saw it last week, right? What did you think of it? Did it live up to your expectations?
It actually did. Yeah.
Yes.
I absolutely loved it. And I've seen it again since. I've seen it twice, hence the bad sleep. And because I know that you saw it a bit before because you went to quite a relatively early screening.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we'd sort of chatted about it on the surface before I went in, because obviously we're talking about it being like highly anticipated and really hyped, and a lot of stuff about it being so terrifying and stuff. And then I spoke to you, and I also spoke to Anna Bogatskaya, and you both sort of said quite similar things to me about like, don't necessarily believe the marketing as much as it is kind of making it out to be this thing, and then you watch the movie and it's maybe not exactly that thing. And I'm glad that I knew that. Now I think going in, I was prepared. I don't know. We get bitten by this stuff a lot, right? And so I was slightly prepared to be disappointed. I was disappointed by Maxine, which I feel like was probably my other most anticipated film of the year so far. And I didn't love it as much as some people have loved it. And so I did go in with high expectations for Longlegs, but kind of cautious. And then came away like, oh no, that did like exactly what I wanted it to do. I fucking loved it.
Amazing. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it too. And I spoke about it on Patreon the other week on Fresh Blood, when we kind of review all the new monthly releases. And I don't know whether I sounded more down on it than I meant to, because I really, really did have a great time with this movie. I think it is one of the best horror films I've seen this year. I think the problem is that for me, the first act, and we'll talk about it in more depth in a minute, but the first act is some of the most like pant-shittingly scary stuff I've watched in a very long time. Like it genuinely like got me in a cold sweat, gripping the edge of my seat. I thought some of the set pieces and the direction was unbelievable. And then it moves kind of, the story does kind of shift a bit and the tone shifts a little bit, and it's still great and compelling, and the performances are amazing and the direction's great, and we'll talk about it as we go. But I think for me, it slightly shifted out of that tone of this is the scariest film of the decade into something a little bit more fun, I suppose, like for me a little bit frothier, and that's fine. I think it's because of maybe my expectations and the marketing that it didn't quite go as hard as I wanted it to go, at least in the second half, you know? Like I wanted to walk out of that screening feeling empty, like I did with Hereditary. And I didn't.
That's such a good way to put it. Yeah, you did. Yeah. I mean, Hereditary is quite an obvious comparison. I think they do share a lot of elements, especially in tone and that like creeping dread, even kind of like the color palette to a certain extent. The kind of framing and the meticulousness of it as well, right? There's something a bit kind of Kubricky about the way both these films look as well. Yeah, definitely. And I know that you spoke to the director Oz Perkins, and he's spoken about this kind of like observational camera, this idea that you're kind of like pulled right back, and how that creates a real sense of kind of tension because you feel so removed from the action, and you are just kind of like, that really serves the horror genre because you don't feel like you can kind of intervene at all. Like you're just watching this stuff unfold and there's nothing that you can do about it to help. And that's definitely a feeling that I get with Hereditary as well. And I think that Ari Aster does something very similar with his framing and his kind of like observational viewpoint. But yeah, I mean, coming back to kind of, what you feel like coming out of both of these films, I definitely felt less like doomy, I guess, with Longlegs. But I do think that you and I had different experiences, because I didn't really feel like it was a movie of kind of two parts. I felt very much that kind of that dread and that terror really was very consistent throughout the whole film. And I know we'll come on to talk about it, but like that the later part of it, when it does all, again, a bit like Hereditary, when it does all sort of go a bit more supernatural and very occulty and a bit more sort of histrionic, that all just added to it for me. It like didn't take away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why, and I wish I had time to watch it a second time before we recorded this, because I think I'd like to go back into it a second time now, knowing what to expect, and just enjoy it more for what it is, because like I say, I did, it's a minor thing. Like it would have been a 5-star movie and it ended up being a 4-star movie for me. That's the only, like, I still had a great time with it. I was still absolutely compelled throughout. It just, and I guess that is similar to Hereditary. You're right. Like, I know a lot of people had a problem with the very last like 20 minutes of Hereditary, how the tone goes a little bit wackier and more over the top and silly, like towards the end, right? And I think, again, like Oz Perkins, when I spoke to him, he mentioned this. He sort of said, look, I know the marketing is saying this is the scariest, the most intense thing ever, but that was never my intention. He was like, I wanted it to be fun.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
So it is really interesting because, what do you think of him as a director? Because, The Blackcoat's Daughter, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in Your House. Like, I think he is a great director of atmosphere. I wouldn't necessarily say he is a director that I would link with the word fun, right? Like, I don't think that, but I think Blackcoat's Daughter is a great, like, very kind of like dread-inducing movie, but I don't think it's that fun, right? But what do you think of him just as a director?
I think he's amazing, and I do agree that fun isn't necessarily the word that springs to mind. I've not seen I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, and I also haven't seen Gretel and Hansel, which is supposed to be amazing.
Neither have I, actually. But again, I've heard very similar things from different people. Some people saying masterpiece, other people saying boring, pretentious, it's all vibes and no story, basically. So, that's his thing, I think. Right?
I quite like it, all vibe, no story. So it's on my list.
I mean, same here. I love David Lynch. So, this is it. Yeah.
I think he's amazing. And like knowing, that there are definite threads, I think, that you can pull very clearly from The Blackcoat's Daughter through into Longlegs. It's like this coldness, and not just the fact that they're both a bit snowy. Like there is this coldness in the palette and in the kind of the point of view of the audience, and also like the way that he directs his actors. And I think the people that he works with, like Kiernan Shipka turns up in Longlegs, and she's not in it for long, but she is absolutely chilling in this. Yeah. And she's amazing in Blackcoat's Daughter. And there is this, I don't know, like he directs his actors where you feel sort of removed from them, and they almost feel kind of removed from each other. There is this sort of like chill that just goes through. There's not a lot of warmth. There's not a lot of fun.
Totally.
But then obviously, I know that he's spoken about kind of wanting with Longlegs to kind of almost like take a step up, almost kind of like reach a wider audience, make a slightly bigger movie, and working with an actor like Nicolas Cage and obviously Michael Monroe, who especially again in horror circles, like we know so well now because she's basically like a modern horror icon. These two names, and especially Nicolas Cage, I guess, he was on production duty as well, and he definitely adds this extra level, right?
Yeah. What's really funny about it, I think, is that he wanted to make a film that was a bit more mainstream, that would reach a bigger audience, that more people would watch. And so he was like, I'm going to make a movie that's like the Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs did really well. That reached a big mainstream audience. And in a way, again, like this comes down to that idea of expectations and where the film takes you. It maybe starts off a bit Silence of the Lambs, but I think overall it's pretty different to the Silence to like an FBI procedural, isn't it, as well? I think that's great. Like, I think, he comes up with an initial conceit, a kind of relatively simple story maybe, but then it kind of goes through the Oz Perkins filter, and it kind of ends up being something entirely different. Again, that's a very Lynch thing. Like, Lynch sets off making a murder mystery, but then it goes through the kind of David Lynch filter and it comes out something very different, right? And I kind of love that about it.
Yeah, definitely. And, Perkins has talked about this idea of you kind of invite people to a dinner party. And so, like what the elements are going to be, but you don't know what the conversation's going to be, right? So like he sort of puts all these pieces together. He has an idea, like say what the menu's going to be and what the evening, like who's going to make that up, but you don't know until everybody goes home kind of what that evening has been like. And I really love that analogy. And he works apparently on Longlegs. He worked like really collaboratively with Michael Monroe and with Nicolas Cage, and he was sort of saying to them, like, you don't have to say every line as it's written in the script. I know that Michael Monroe and Oz Perkins worked really closely together to kind of build out the character of Lee Harker, Special Agent Lee Harker. And so, and I think that really plays into this idea of he had this vision of, right, let's do something like Silence of the Lambs. That was successful, and I love it. And I think he was about like 16 when Silence of the Lambs came out, and so it was like that sort of like a bit of a sweet spot for him when he like first saw that movie.
Absolutely. And let's not forget as well, this man's dad is Anthony Perkins, right, as well. So like grown up with big mainstream horror in his veins,
which I literally didn't know until about 6 days ago. I was like, I'm sorry, what? This is the guy from Legally Blonde, and his dad was Anthony Perkins.
I know, what a guy, what an interesting man, right?
Really interesting. It's not surprising he makes such interesting films. But so this sort of this collaborative approach that he uses, and he sort of has this idea of something. So say, I want to do something like Silence of the Lambs. But then by the end of it, by the time, it hits audiences, obviously, as you say, it's gone through the Osgood Perkins filter, and it is something very different. And it is different, I mean, my God, can you see the Silence of the Lambs comparisons? Like, there's a lot of Clarice in Lee.
It's literally set in the 90s, right? About an female young FBI agent.
Exactly, who's like on her first case. And she's got this sort of close working relationship with her boss, like Clarice does. And also there's something in the like Nicolas Cage performance as well, which I think does hark back to Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, because, he is like Lecter is terrifying, as we know, but he's also kind of like camp and silly, and he's got those lines where they do make you laugh, like closer, all of that stuff. Like he is sort of like, he's big, and so that comes through in Cage's performance as well. I assume that him and Perkins would have talked about the Silence of the Lambs comparisons. I don't know how much Cage was actually like channeling Hopkins. Totally.
Also a bit Buffalo Bill too, right? Like there's a bit of, you think of Buffalo Bill, his look, the weird scenes when he's dancing in his house. Like there's a bit of Nick Cage is almost like channeling in equal parts both, I think. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about Lynch as well. Like I'm currently watching for the first time the second bit of season 2 of Twin Peaks, because I had
the shit bit.
Shit bit. Because I'm prepping for a screening that we're doing, and there is a scene in that, and I was texting you like, this is very Longlegs, isn't it? I don't know if it's because I literally saw Longlegs yesterday, but fucking hell, like this is very similar. And I love that then you spoke to Perkins, and he was like, oh yeah, like I think about Lynch all the time. Like if you're going to draw from something, watch Eraserhead 10 times. I'm like, okay, that does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Eraserhead, and Eraserhead, perfect, right? Perfect kind of example of something that is so creepy and weird and art house, but also really funny.
Yeah.
And doesn't take itself too seriously too, like the weird dinner table sequence in Eraserhead and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I think, again, like maybe that's why I'm keen to go back into it again with like slightly different expectations, knowing that maybe he was going more for something like that.
Yes.
And the way in which he kind of blends genres as well, right? How do you find that? I mean, because you mentioned it already, like the setup is, Silence of the Lambs or Seven or Son of Sam or like those kinds of things, right? And then it moves into a cult. You've got Satanism. You've got creepy dolls. Like you've got like weird like horned monsters potentially, right? Like it is throwing everything, like all the kind of like big horror ingredients from different subgenres at you, all in this little 90-minute film, right? Like, do you think that works, or does it ever feel kind of overstuffed?
No, I think it works perfectly, and that is definitely the bit that I wasn't expecting at all, and that I think like I say, I didn't watch the trailer, but I think the marketing really didn't give a lot of clues about the more kind of like supernatural side of it. Like I wasn't expecting this to be in any way a supernatural film, and I guess you get your first kind of glimpse of it very early on, actually, when Lee and her first partner like go out on this sort of other job, and she's having this like sort of psychic moment almost. She's like pointing to a house and saying like that's where he is, like talking about the perp that they're after, and so you get this glimpse that like maybe there's another kind of level to her, and then she sort of does this kind of test, I guess, back at the bureau, which is almost like a sort of Rorschach test, and that's really like confusing. Like I found that really confusing because I mean I know that, you know, the point of these sorts of tests is like super subjective, but like she's responding to these images that are being shown to her in like such a baffling way. I'm like, I mean, I don't know, that doesn't look like a giraffe to me or whatever. And then she has this conversation with Carter, her boss, about, he says like, you beat the number generator like 8 times, and she's like, well, I also missed it 8 times, and he's like, yeah, but half psychic's like better than not psychic at all. And so it is like really early you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like she's not just a Clarice Starling clone, is she? She's obviously got something else. And then obviously like much sort of towards the back end of the film, it does get revealed that Longlegs is like literally a devil worshipper. They don't sort of mince their words about that at all. It's not like, you know, oh, this looks like devil worship, this looks like the occult, this looks like witchcraft. It's like, oh no, he worships the devil. And then you do kind of see these like glimpses, shadows of like almost like sort of Baphomet kind of beasts, and then like you say, you get this weird thing with these dolls that are made to look like the little girls in the families that are being murdered, but then they've got like this thing in their head, so it's like a sort of sphere in their head that then has like a weird kind of like purple smoke in it, and that seems to like hypnotize these little girls, or the dolls seem to hypnotize these little girls. Like, yeah, there's a lot, but no, it didn't feel overstuffed. It felt, as it sort of unfolded, it felt like it did unfold quite organically, and I wasn't like, sorry, what the fuck is happening now? I mean, I was, but not in like a negative way.
No, in a good way.
Exactly.
I agree, he's so good at that. Like, it's the same with The Black Coat's Daughter. Like, it feels kind of sparse as a film in a way, even though there's quite a lot going on, right? And I really love that. I think that's really smart. So let's talk a little bit about these characters and the performances then. Like, you've mentioned Micah Monroe, you know, who is becoming, it's not often this happens with actors, but like, she herself is becoming like a stamp of approval for horror, right? Like, the films that she's in are so interesting, and the performances she gives are so interesting, right? And Lee Harker is a weird main character. She's not as somebody that you can kind of like empathize with as clearly as you can with Clarice Starling, for example, who's so human, right? Like, how do you find Lee Harker as our kind of protagonist and that Micah Monroe performance?
God, yeah, she's awkward.
You wouldn't want to be on your own in a room with her almost, would you? Like,
there's that incredible scene where she goes back to Carter's house and like goes into the little girl's room. Yeah. And they're sort of like talking really awkwardly on the bed. And she's sort of like, Lee is
facing away.
Yeah, like facing away, like perched like right on the edge of the bed, because like she just doesn't really know what to do with her body, and she's like stiff as a board. And she's almost sort of, she's almost like non-verbal at points, like when she first goes into the house and the mum and the daughter are sort of greeting her and sort of asking her questions, like she just doesn't respond. She's really internal.
Yes.
And like when she talks to her mum, there is this sort of chill there, and you do get this
Mm-hmm.
idea. And obviously, again, this sort of plays out that she has had this sort of really like traumatic event, like when she was a kid. But she definitely seems to be like holding on to a lot of stuff. And Micah Monroe is so good at that. Like it's such a different performance from her than it is, say, in something like The Guest, where she's so like cool and sexy and kind of like action, like, you know, I know that she's not the action star in that. I know that that's Dan Stevens, and she's a waitress. She's sort of the daughter, the sister, but she is very kind of like emotional, I suppose, and like externally facing. You know, she's sort of confrontational and stuff. And you don't get that with Lee at all, and Micah Monroe's performance in Longlegs. And then you know, in It Follows and in Watcher, and that, have you seen Significant Other, which is the one where she's like out in the woods? No. It's good. You should check it out. It's really good. But she's very like, you sort of hear her interviewed as well, and she's very sort of expressive and energetic, whereas doesn't always come across on screen, and I think least so in Longlegs. Like she's very kind of she's keeping a lot kind of in, not even like she's keeping her cards close to her chest. Like she's like a coiled spring.
Yeah, she's an amazing mix, you know, of kind of like slightly weird and ethereal on screen, whilst also being really like, you really root for her at the same time, right?
Definitely.
I remember interviewing her after It Follows, and again, like her character, everyone in It Follows is a bit weird, right? That's got that kind of weird, dreamlike, ethereal quality to it. And you're right, like I remember being quite surprised when I met her in person, just how bubbly and giggly and just like a normal young actress she was, basically, because she's so good at playing like slight weirdos, right? And I love that about her.
She is great, and she's such a talent. And I think you're absolutely right what you say about her becoming this stamp of approval, because it feels like she's either choosing her projects really well, or she's got like a really good agent, or she's obviously, whether she's auditioning for these parts, or directors are kind of, they've got her in mind sort of from the offset. She's obviously got something that is making these connections with these directors and making them sort of see her as, right, she is the person that I need, like, to kind of carry this film and carry this story and carry this character. And it's amazing that she has carved out this kind of this space for herself in these sort of these kind of more indie horror films. And she's been there like right from the offset, because It Follows was, you know, when we talk about this kind of mid to late noughties kind of resurgence of the horror genre. I'm not going to use the E word, but
but I think we could say maybe art house horror. There's something of an art house horror that she's becoming known for, right?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, she is kind of, she's almost become like the face of that. And I'm super excited for They Follow as well, like to see where they take that.
So exciting. Yeah, I think she's amazing in it. And like, I know we've joked about this before, and I'm sure there must be like joke letterboxd lists out there of like movies in which Micah Monroe is being pursued by somebody who may or may not be in the background of the frame in any given moment, right? Because again, this movie kind of fits that, right? Again, particularly in that first act, like I was gripping my seat those moments when she's like home alone in the dark. She receives the knock at the door, the letter. Is there somebody out in her front yard? Is there then somebody in her house? Like when she comes back in. Oh my God, it was
fucking bit when you see him like move across the window when she's outside.
Honestly,
I shat myself.
It's so good, right? Like that stuff is so fucking scary. And I love the way in which Osgood Perkins uses kind of like different aspect ratios, right, as well, and the way in which sometimes he uses big, wide open spaces, and then other times there are moments where, like, you cut off half of somebody's face or something, right?
Oh,
and
my
that in
God.
itself is also absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and the cuts as well, like when you're... So, I mean, okay, the opening scene where we first meet Longlegs, and you talk about, like, the top of the head being cut off.
Oh, my God.
And you don't know what you're looking at. Like, what even gender is this person? And you know what, and like their mouth is like wide and scary, and they're talking in this fucking weird cadence, and they're saying these weird things, and they're kind of fluttering their hands around, and then you just get this like silent scream and cut, and it's like it's a jump scare. Like, it's
my God,
absolute. Talk about an opening scene, like, it scared the shit out of me.
Me too. That was when I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be the scariest movie in years. Like, I really thought that at that point, because I was absolutely shitting it in that first scene.
Definitely.
So good. You're so right. Like, the timing of it, the edits, the sound design, the cuts, like, he just knows. And I asked him about this and he didn't have an answer, and fair enough. You can't explain this sometimes, like how you create an effective scare, right? Like, it almost comes subconsciously. Like, you can't really explain it in words. And there is just something about the way in which he frames and shoots and edits things that are absolutely terrifying.
Oh my God. Like, again, sort of coming back to this idea of the sort of observational point of view, there's a bit later when you flash back to the murder on the farm of, I think it's like the camera family. It's basically Kiernan Shipka's character's family that she survived. She's like the sole survivor. And you're basically watching this murder happen like through a doorway.
There's a lot of like through doors and through windows,
lots of through
isn't
doors,
there?
down corridors. Like, it's really claustrophobic, but also removed. So you're not really sure kind of where you and the characters are kind of sitting, like, within the space, and that's really disorienting. And so you're kind of watching this sort of axe murder of a priest like happen like through a doorway, big spray of blood, and then the mum like comes through the door, and you realize that you're actually the camera is the little girl or the doll. I wasn't even sure, like, which one are you? And then the mum kind of comes in and looks at her, and then the dad comes up behind her with the axe, and then it cuts again, like, oh my God, like, all of that stuff. And it's you know, probably, I don't know, 5 to 7 seconds of screen time, but like, it's stuck with me so much because it's unusual, and it's disorienting, and it's scary, and it's kind of beautiful to look at all at the same time. Like, amazing stuff.
It's one of those things that I think not enough horror filmmakers kind of do and get, is that sometimes, like, I think there's probably a tendency, and I understand it, like, if you're making a horror film, to shoot things like quite close up and quite intimate and quite claustrophobic. But there's something about like open space that is really scary, I think. Like, obviously, I think the most famous example is probably The Shining, but Oz Perkins talks about this too, like that idea of like, leave room above somebody's head and around somebody, because you're kind of waiting for something to happen in that space at all time, right? And that is so scary. It's that feeling of anticipation, I think, that kind of thing builds.
Oh God, 100%. I mean, this idea, was it Alex Ayling coined this term of like frame analysis horror? Like, that phrase kept jumping into my head while I was watching Longlegs. You talk about the bit where she's at home and he's been in and he's left the letter, and just he's framed it like off center. So she is like on our right as we're watching it, and behind her there's just the open doorway, and usually something would happen in the doorway. You would see something run past the door or something move. And so I'm not watching her open the letter. I'm watching this fucking doorway, waiting for something to scare the shit out of me. And then nothing turns up. And again, he's playing with audience expectations. He's playing with space. He's playing with tension and like, oh my God, yeah, just the whole thing is like absolutely dripping with dread.
So good. And how do you find, like, while we're on the first act, how do you find the whole kind of serial killer Longlegs kind of plot and setup to be? So we've got these series of clues, we've got these kind of coded messages, we've got this thing about birthdays in June and kind of calendar patterns and stuff, right? Like, how did you find that, the way in which the actual kind of, I guess, serial killer mystery kind of unfolds?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I fucking love a serial killer film. You know,
me too.
We've talked
and
about,
I love anything with like puzzles and codes.
Love
and
it.
stuff,
Zodiac,
you know?
big fan.
Yes,
like, there's a lot of Zodiac in this. I love it when she's going through, because obviously it's a 90 set serial killer film, so you have to have a point where she goes and looks through the microfiche.
Yes,
love it. Tick, bingo. And so, you know, she's got the microfiche and she's got a calendar and she's like marking all the dates. And then she like looks in a book that's called like, I don't know, the 7 Circles of Hell or something.
Yeah.
Finds the inverted triangle. And then like she, you know, she sort of draws it on. And then like you say, you've got these like sort of very sort of Zodiac style sort of coded letters, you know, with these symbols. And then later they talk about Longlegs, his luggage being like full of these notebooks with all of these like demonic or like devil worshipy kind of notes, which again feels very Seven.
So good.
So yeah, I mean, I thought it, you know, all of those films that we love so much, Seven, Zodiac, Silence of the Lambs, it's just like, yeah, just get it into my veins. And I think he does it so well because these are obviously things that he is hugely inspired by, and like by his own admission has like purposefully kind of referenced and drawn from. Yeah. But at the same time, Longlegs doesn't feel like, even in those moments closer to the beginning when it is this more sort of FBI procedural, it still feels like its own movie. It still feels like it's using these puzzle pieces to create its own picture. Also, like quite a Zodiac thing. Banging soundtrack too. You've got like T-Rex and stuff as well. Like it kind of, it's using that kind of like specific time period and kind of pop culture references along with it as well, right? Yeah, definitely. Although weirdly, I don't really think of T-Rex as like a 90s. They're not. Well, no, because I suppose like the murders start in the 70s, don't they? Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, because it's mainly used when we go to the kind of like 4:3 aspect ratio, when we're in the kind of like the old school 70s stuff. Yeah, which they shot on like actual negative, didn't they? So like to really kind of distinguish it. My dad, good old Derek Darke, he's a big T-Rex fan. So is he? Couldn't stop thinking about him while I was watching this. Yeah, I bet he'd like it. I think he would actually. I think he'd really like it. Yeah, I love, and you know, banging soundtrack, which often again with Micah Monroe films you often get, because like It Follows has got a banging soundtrack. But also like the sound design, you know, you were talking earlier about Eraserhead, like this like drone in the background. There's this sort of like this use of strings at times that sounds like kind of fingernails on a blackboard. There's this kind of like, I don't know, like she keeps sort of hearing noises in the background, but even those don't sound like noises kind of within the movie. They sound like kind of almost like choral, you know, like this. Oh my God. Like just dread inducing. Love it so much. And I think all of that stuff is so interesting. And obviously it sets up this idea that there is this killer called Longlegs, but the kind of the main mystery is, right, as well as who is it, is how were these murders pulled off? Because it seems more like a lot of the time no one else was actually in the house with them, right? Like it was almost like there is this killer, but the victims are kind of inside jobs where like it's a father killing members of his own family or whatever, right? So I guess it kind of sets up that there may or may not be something supernatural again from the very beginning, right, in that regard. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like the only kind of clue that anyone's been there are these letters that are left. Yeah. And it does, I guess, from early on kind of set up this idea of like, is there an accomplice? Is there somebody, although that like they can't link the families apart from this weird thing around the daughter always has a birthday on the 14th of the month and the murder is always committed within 6 days either side of the 14th. That's right. But they're sort of already thinking like it's got to be somebody who the family knows or somebody that they would like trust to let into the house.
Yeah.
And then obviously later we find out like why that is.
Yeah, so good. So all of that stuff's great. And actually, by the way, I think Blair Underwood as Agent Carter is so good and really important, I think, because he is the kind of heart and sort of grounding force of this story, isn't he? Like, just like normal, capable FBI agent who is a little bit more a kind of audience surrogate, I would say, even more than Micah Monroe's character is, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right, he is more grounded. Like, he's got the sort of the functional family, you know, she's got her mum, but that is not a functional relationship. So
which, by the way, you know, as soon as, I don't know if you felt this, but as soon as I met his family and the fact that they have a young daughter, I was like, you know, that's where this is heading. You know?
Alarm bells. So and he's you know, we've talked about Lee being very sort of cold and awkward and distant. He is warm and he's got more of a sense of humor and he's more kind of like open. And I mean, they're such a good kind of character pairing, I think.
Always love a kind of like cop pairing as well, like two FBI agents put together on a case, you know, don't necessarily get on initially, bit different from each other, you know. It's a classic, isn't it? I love it.
Well, and also, I mean, we haven't mentioned it yet, but there's an X-Files thing going on here. Even like, you know, even down to, again, the score, like... I never know how to describe it, but it turns up now and again. It's like, it always makes me think of the X-Files. It's that thing that they do with like the strings, and in the X-Files it's always when there's like an alien and it's like this sort of like little like sort of, I don't know, like they pluck the strings or something, like, or like just sort of like tap on them and it sort of makes this sort of like weird little sort of like jangly noise. And they use that in this, and I kept thinking like, be great if Mulder and Scully just turned up as a little cameo, wouldn't it?
Oh God, wouldn't it just? Yeah. And some of those FBI, like, again, I think you touched upon it, but that moment at the beginning when we're kind of introduced to these characters and Lee Harker kind of senses where this killer is on this street, and they burst in a different killer, right? And they burst into the house and there's just like clear plastic everywhere. And I jumped out of my fucking skin once again in that sequence. It's so scary.
Well, when the dude gets shot.
Yeah. Oh my God. So good. So good.
And again, sort of coming back to Lee, she's not this kind of like ovaries of iron kind of, you know, new recruit, is she? She's vulnerable and she's terrified, and like you get a lot of her heavy breathing and kind of wildly swinging her gun around, whether that is in that moment when she goes into the house or later when she's outside her own house, because there's, you know, the sort of intruder. She feels like she's always on the verge of just being like, do you know what, actually I've decided I don't really want to be an FBI agent, thank you very much, this is all a bit much. Yes.
Oh my God, absolutely. The little girl, when she's like, is it hard being a lady FBI agent? She's like, yeah. That's great. Who is it, by the way, that's actually in her house? Is it Nick Cage? Is it Longlegs? Like that moment when she gets left the letter I
think so. I feel like when she first looks outside and you see the silhouette, like I feel like that's his silhouette.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the mum.
Because a lot of the plot, I don't know whether... Does it make complete sense? I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, to be honest. I don't mind that it doesn't. But why is he, at this point in time, coming for her, given everything that went on when she was a little girl and the pact that he had with her mother and everything? Doesn't
he say to her, when she first goes into the interrogation room, I'm sure he says something like... we've been like here she is finally, like we've been waiting for this moment. So I wonder if it's like they've been waiting for her to like graduate or like become this agent. Okay. And I don't know, has he sort of engineered it somehow so that she's on the case? I don't really know how that would have happened. But there are other points during the film where I was like, hold on a minute, I feel like, did I sort of fall asleep and miss something? Like, you get the bit where she finds the photo of him that she took when she was a kid. So she finds the Polaroid. She takes it to Carter. She's like, this is him.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, okay, well, like, is this enough to put out a manhunt? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. And so, and then literally the next thing we know is Longlegs is on the side of the road at the bus stop with his luggage.
And everyone gets him.
And the police are screaming up. And I'm like, how did they find him?
Well, I guess he has been kind of slightly hiding in plain sight, hasn't he? Like, he is this weirdo who I guess people in the town, because there's that moment when he walks into a store and talks to that girl and she's like, the creepy man's here again. And like,
she's great.
She's great. And I guess maybe it's just that, I guess they skipped all of the stuff that we didn't need to see, but it's almost like there's a person that fits this description, and maybe there are certain people who are like, I have seen this person. He comes into my store every other fucking day.
I mean, he's quite distinctive.
He's quite distinctive. Let's talk about him then, because like as we move into the kind of middle act of the film, this is where the film slightly shifts perspective, I guess. Like, we suddenly start getting scenes of Longlegs by himself, right? We're no longer just like with the FBI. It kind of shows us this other side of things, and we've got Nick Cage doing his Nick Cage thing as Longlegs, right? What did you think of Longlegs? The costume design, the prosthetics, the performance. How did you find this portrayal of this character?
Absolutely fucking terrifying. And
this is where we're going to disagree.
Yes, it is. This is where we come to loggerheads, because I disagree that this is Nick Cage doing his Nick Cage thing. I absolutely disagree with that. I think it's a really nuanced performance, and this thing about him sort of singing and screaming and dancing, like that being like a somehow a kind of Nick Cage trademark. I just don't think it is. Like, literally name another film that he's like that. And I think he genuinely is like unrecognizable at points in this film. And that's not just because of the hair and the makeup and the costume, like his mannerisms, his voice. He just sort of embodies this character so much that all I see is Longlegs. I don't really see Nick Cage. And so this idea that it kind of like shifts into being another Nick Cage movie, I just don't agree with. I think that he actually slots into it seamlessly. And for me, I found him absolutely chilling. Like, just moments where the bit when he's in the shop and he kind of puts his like hands over his face and like in that sort of like cuckoo or like he'll just like the way that he'll just sort of open his mouth, or like I thought he was fucking brilliant in this film. And it's not like the film scared me and then all of a sudden Nicolas Cage shows up and he's playing the serial killer. Like, Nicolas Cage scared me as Longlegs.
God, I could not disagree more with almost everything you just said. Like, to me, there was nothing seamless about Nick Cage fitting into this film. This was all I could think was, that's not Longlegs, that's Nicolas Cage. Like,
wow.
And that was such a problem for me. Like, I'm not saying that I think Nick Cage is a bad actor. I think he's fucking amazing. I just think that the choices he was making in this film, to me, again, maybe it just came down to my expectations, but to me just didn't fit the film. Like, I was so in this oppressive, dark, broody, horrible, nightmarish atmosphere, and then it was Nick Cage being Nick Cage. And I do think that was Nick Cage doing his Nick Cage thing. And I'm not saying he does that exact same thing, as in like dances and sings and puts his hands in front of his face, but he does this thing where he always acts like he is the biggest thing in any film he's in, and he goes, now it's time for Nick Cage, right? That is how I feel he is. And sometimes that fits really well in certain films, and sometimes for me it just doesn't. There are certain films that I think perfectly fit the Nick Cage tone, and I love them, including David Lynch's Wild at Heart. Like, I think he's amazing in so many films. But for me, the tone that this movie initially set itself up to be was not the tone that Nick Cage was going for in his performance. And like it did, unfortunately, it did just, I stopped being completely immersed and gripping the side of my seat in a cold sweat, and I started going, oh, look at Nick Cage in all of those prosthetics and in that funny outfit. And that was an issue for me. Yeah.
No, no, it's not often that you and I disagree, but we disagree wholeheartedly on this.
Yeah.
I'm completely the other way. I think he just disappeared into it. Like, obviously it's Nick Cage. Of course it fucking is. But like, no, I just thought he was remarkable.
Yeah, and like he is so charismatic and he's so full of energy and maybe just too much for me sometimes. I don't know, but it just like he is. What'd you say?
Charismatic.
Yeah, he's so charismatic. Nick Cage.
Oh, Nick Cage. I thought you meant Longlegs.
Well, kind of. Like Nick Cage was too charismatic for Longlegs, I think, almost. Yeah.
No.
I don't know. Like, I for me, that opening scene when we see half of his face and we hear him say about 3 words was as much as I wanted to see of Longlegs. And that's my own issue, I suppose. But like, I didn't need these scenes with him singing in the car and everything else. Like, but you know, like I say, like I am maybe I will completely change my mind in time. Like I will go back to it. I will absolutely give it another chance. Yeah, maybe it's to do with that marketing and those expectations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think specifically to that point about like when you do start spending time with him on his own, like when he's in the car, and for me that makes him terrifying because. So Osgood, I've heard in another interview, and I wonder if subconsciously I picked up on this because I heard this after I'd seen the film twice. He talks about when he first started thinking about the character of Longlegs, of him being like this weird guy who basically turns up uninvited to children's birthday parties.
Yeah.
And he sort of turns up with like stuffed animals and like a little keyboard, and he's like, he describes him as like the clown you didn't invite to the birthday party.
It sounds in theory like a League of Gentlemen or a Psychoville character,
doesn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
Which I find funny, not scary. But anyway,
fine. Yeah, I mean, I would if it was, you know, Steve Pemberton or Reece Shearsmith.
Yeah.
But those points where you see him on his own, and like there's specifically that moment after he's been in with the unsung hero, the girl in the shop, and she's like, Dad, that weird guy's back again.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to Cage or to Longlegs in the car, and he is like screaming like, Daddy, Mommy, like that, and he's obviously like so kind of enraged, and it's those moments when you see him on his own and he's not doing the clown performance, he's not in front of one of these kids, he's not in front of Lee, he's not in front of like anybody, he's on his own, that made him the most terrifying to me, because I'm like, I need those moments. I need to see him being mental on his own, because that proves to me that this isn't an act. Like, this is the person that he is. And that is somebody to be really scared of, because he's obviously completely fucking unhinged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't disagree with that. It's true. And I do love the costume choices. It's weird. I like the fact, although I can't help but think, I know that our friend Nat did message both of us and said that basically all she could think about was Jackie Stallone. And it's true. He looks like Jackie Stallone.
I've seen another one. I've never seen White Chicks, but
yes, White Chicks. Exactly.
I've seen a meme about White Chicks. Brad said that he looked like John Travolta in the Hairspray remake.
Exactly, that classic kind of like whiter than white facial prosthetic. It is, and it is creepy and it is funny at the same time. And I think that's genuinely what Oz Perkins was going for, which is absolutely fair enough.
Absolutely fair enough. But I found it seamless. I didn't find it jarring.
Sure, yeah. And like, again, like I'll give it another go. But let me tell you, as we move into the third act, an unhinged, underrated performance that I wasn't expecting was Alicia fucking Witt. Oh my God, what a joy to have her in this film, right?
Alicia fucking Witt. And talking about people you didn't recognise, I knew Alicia Witt was in this movie.
Yes, because she comes up in the credits, doesn't she?
Comes up in the credits.
Away. Yeah.
And then I got to the end of the film and I'd forgotten that Alicia Witt was supposed to be in it. And then I was like, oh, that was good. And then I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Alicia Witt was the mum. unrecognizable.
Now that is the right kind of unhinged performance for me. I thought she was fucking brilliant in this.
She is phenomenal in it.
Yeah, so good.
And even like, so you get the mum in the flashbacks where she's got the sort of short 70s hair.
Yes.
And then obviously you get her in 90s present day where she's got that sort of long, like, like graying kind of like very poker straight hair. And she's just this, again, I think you used the words earlier about Michael Monroe, this sort of ethereal presence.
Yeah.
And she's obviously like a bit bonkers.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And she's got like Lee's like teeth in
milk teeth. Oh my God. The house is terrible. Like every time we go into that house, you just get the feeling you do not want to be there, right? I thought that was so clever. This is, again, like a very Lynchian thing. Like, I feel like every time we were in that house, even when there was nothing overtly sinister going on, you just like, what is the deal with this woman in this place?
Definitely.
Right? Like the stacks of newspapers and shit, the room that is being kept locked, the cockroaches, like it's just a horrible atmosphere, right? And you know that this woman is not okay.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, you're supposed to understand, I think at this stage of the film, before obviously the big reveal, you're supposed to understand that she's just like perhaps a little mentally unwell.
Yes,
she's not necessarily capable of kind of looking after herself. She might be a bit of a hoarder. She's obviously vulnerable. She doesn't have a particularly great relationship with Lee. I love it. There's like this repeating motif of Lee will ring her and she'll say, "Hi, Mum, it's me." And then Mum will go, "Lee?" And she'll go like, "Yep, still your only daughter."
Yeah. So good.
I love it. It's really funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, you do sort of get this sense of like this sort of frustration that one gets with their parents, right? Especially as like, as like we are, we're in our late 30s, early 40s. Our parents are getting on a bit and they might get a little forgetful, or they might like say something a bit odd, and you're like, oh God, like, and you just get that so much from Lee. She's just like, for fuck's sake, Mum, like, pull it together.
And she's a bit like, there's a bit of Margaret White or something going on here, right? This kind of strange, sheltered mother and daughter. She's quite religious. She's a bit gaudy, right?
Keeps going on about whether Lee's saying her prayers.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And you're like, oh no, but you're right. You're like, is it just that she's a bit mentally ill, or is there something even more red flag here, right? I guess is the mystery. And of course, it turns out that she is this kind of, she's this sort of reluctant accomplice, right, to Longlegs, who... So did I get this right? She kind of struck a deal with Longlegs, right? To sort of say, if you spare my family and my daughter, I will help you kill other families, essentially, right? Yeah,
exactly. She says when Lee does go round to visit her, and this is too early in the film, I think, the first time you watch it to really, or certainly I was too dumb to put pieces together. She says something like... you're lucky you got a chance to grow up.
That's right.
She says something. Lee says something like, "I'm not a kid anymore," and her mum says something like, "Yeah, well, you're lucky you got the chance to grow up."
Yeah.
And obviously, then when you find out, you kind of put these pieces together. It's like, oh, like Longlegs basically turns up in that opening scene. He is there to do what he does and like kill this family. He's on Almost Birthday Girl, this, and. And like you say, exactly. So Mum basically strikes this deal, and she's like, if you spare Lee, I will basically help to like deliver you these other girls, these other families.
Yeah. And so this is where we get the introduction of we've had it already, but the introduction of these creepy dolls, right, as well, that kind of play into this. And this is where, like you said, it kind of, it's much more kind of overtly full on supernatural, right? That it's these So is it that she knocks on their door, pretending to be some sort of like God type person, right? Gets invited in.
None.
And none. That's the one.
you go.
God type person. I forgot those words. None. And she... Is it that she delivers the dolls to the families?
She turns up and she's like, "Hi, I'm from the church. You've won a contest.
That's
and
right.
Here's your prize." And the prize is, terrifyingly, a life-size doll that looks exactly like your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, sure, come in. What?
Fucking hell. Yeah. So scary, isn't it? And then, of course, she just sort of sits and watches as these things happen in front of her, right?
Because... So Longlegs makes the dolls.
Mm-hmm. In his basement.
Well, now
Mm.
I'm going to credit my friend and yours, Bradley Hanson, with this. When we were out on Friday nights, we had a lovely little fresh blood get together last Friday, didn't we? That was fun.
And Steph hadn't seen the film yet. She arrived about 10, 15 minutes later than us three. So we three were like, quick, right, let's talk about Longlegs.
Go. And but before even you showed up, when Brad and I were doing shots before you turned up,
Jesus.
He was like, did you clock that basically the locked door in the mum's house where the cockroach comes out of and Lee can't get in? He was like, I think that's the basement. I think that's where Longlegs is making his dolls.
Oh, so they were in the same house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's creepy. I like
Isn't
that.
it?
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, he makes the dolls potentially in the mum's basement, which is fucking terrifying in itself, with his like Mark Bolan poster behind him and all the red lighting. And he's a devil worshipper. And this is where like the really overtly supernatural occult thing comes in, because there's something in the dolls, right?
Yeah.
So he makes them to look exactly like the daughter of the family that's going to get them delivered and then kill each other.
Yeah.
And then in the head, there is this orb. And in the orb, there is this purple substance.
Yeah.
Smoky situation. And the doll is kind of like hypnotic and kind of like possesses and like makes the family go bonkers and kill each other.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. Yeah, and we get those creepy scenes like the father with the axe. Was that Kiernan Shipka's kind of flashback?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, love the little like random supporting characters. Like when they go to see Kiernan Shipka's character, and there's that really like camp man working on the desk, right? In fact, this whole film has got a lot of camp energy. Actually,
a lot of camp energy,
hasn't it? Yeah,
it does. And I know. When you said about like it turns a bit funny, to be fair, I roared with laughter where they look in the logbook and Longlegs is signed in as Lee Harker and she says, so did the guards ask for ID? And the guy goes, yeah, that does seem like it would be a good idea, doesn't it? No. So funny.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good. Those little strange supporting characters and moments in this. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dolls are incredibly creepy, and we get these little glimpses of these families kind of killing each other throughout the film. But then, of course, it all culminates in Carter's house and Carter's family, right? Which kind of, again, like felt very much inevitable, right? But it's a really great, tense kind of final showdown, I think, that final sequence.
Well, it is great and tense, and what it does is it sort of all of these elements of the film and the story that we've had up until this point, which are sort of glimpses and flashbacks and sort of bits and pieces that we're sort of trying to put together to figure out like how it works, what is happening. Then what this final scene does is it shows us almost in real time of how it all plays out. Right. So the mum is there in the living room. The Miss Ruby, the daughter, has got her doll that looks exactly like her, scary. And Carter and his wife are acting very weird, strangely, like they're hypnotized, like they're in a sort of trance.
He's gone a bit Jack Torrance, hasn't he?
He has gone very Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
And then he's like, darling, can I speak to you in the kitchen? And then like you just kind of hear what's going on in there.
Yeah.
And then obviously Lee has to do the kind of I was going to say the Clarice Starling thing, but of course in that it's like she's really going after like Buffalo Bill, but here it's like she is in the house with this murderous person and she's like, I'm gonna have to shoot him, like I'm gonna have to take him out. And so it sort of adds in to that classic sort of like FBI showdown against a final boss. Is she's actually having to take out her boss and her mum like to save this little girl. Like that is fucking brutal.
Absolutely brutal. It's Ruby's the only family member that survives, right?
Exactly. Yeah, she basically saves Ruby and then it's like credits. T-Rex.
That's right. I'm just reading the Wikipedia synopsis. Lee tells Ruby that they need to leave, but remains frozen in place, staring at the doll as the voice of Longlegs begins singing Happy Birthday, and then it ends. That's right. Yeah. So it kind of, we don't quite know what Lee's fate is ultimately, right?
No.
Like she's just killed her boss and her mother in this kind of pretty horrific situation, and this doll that she doesn't manage to destroy, I think, is still kind of staring back at her. Because also, like we didn't really mention, but Longlegs, you know, when he kind of takes slightly more center stage in that middle section of the film, it all culminates with him killing himself, right? He smashes his head against a desk. And again, like, is this all part of his master plan? Like, did he know he was going to get caught, and did he know that ultimately he was going to die there and that it was still going to continue beyond him, do you think?
I think so. Yeah. You get this idea, like he's so obsessed with Lee. You know, this idea that the deal that the mum struck with him to spare Lee, he's only really upheld that to a certain extent because he's always been obsessed with her. He's always had her in his sights. It's not like obviously he's now got this kind of like accomplice relationship with the mum, but you don't get the feeling like he's just like, oh, okay, like I can't have Lee, I'm over it, I'll move on to somebody else. He's like, he's absolutely obsessed, isn't he? And so this idea that maybe he has been orchestrating it, waiting for her to become the FBI agent that takes on his case. Like, if he's so kind of enamored with her, like he's sort of always calling her like his little angel and like, he, you know, here she is and all of that. It's like, I don't know, I get the impression that maybe like he always knew she'd catch him, or he wanted her to catch him, or like whatever. And then, like, as you say, like he basically takes himself out. In like, definitely in my screening, that was the moment that everybody was like kind of gasping and like covering their faces when he's just like repeatedly, which again, like we've seen stuff like that before.
Talk to me.
You know,
I think of Talk to Me.
I was literally about to say Talk to Me. But yes, like it's a really well done moment, and it is fucking brutal and scary.
There's something always horrible, isn't there, about watching somebody smash their face against something. I mean, obviously, now I say that sentence, obviously that is. But I think, you know, more so than somebody getting like stabbed or beheaded or whatever, like there's something about that really makes you kind of wince, isn't there? You know?
Definitely, like self-imposed. Trauma like that is always really hard to watch. And like you know, there's other moments that are sort of akin to it earlier in the film where you get the flashback and get that weird bit where the mum is like in the chair and she's kind of like cutting her own like stomach with that big kitchen knife. Not Lee's mum, Kiernan Shipka's mum, the farm mum. That's a really chilling moment as well. And again, like the way it's framed, the cuts between, like the way it's edited, again, just really like disturbing.
Oh my god, it's so good. And I think like what the film does so well is that it sort of gives you enough plot that you could probably make sense of it, but it doesn't make complete sense. Like, it's kind of nightmare logic, right? Where, like, I'm still a little bit unclear as to what certain scenes and images and moments meant, right? And that, to me, is a great thing. Like, and yet it still feels really satisfying. It's still absolutely terrifying. It just means that I cannot wait to go watch it again, basically, right? You know?
Yeah, it's the perfect level of ambiguity for me. I'm not a fan of things that are left open-ended and mysteries and, you know, too much ambiguity. I do like things to be tied up to a certain degree. I like things to feel neat.
Yeah, Absolutely.
And it does feel neat, but it does still have, like you say, that kind of that right level of like, but what about this?
Yeah.
And like, I want to kind of explore this more, and I want to go back and kind of see if I can figure this bit out.
Exactly.
And kind of, if you can't, then that's all right. Like, I like that there are still questions.
Yeah, because we're in this world of supernatural happenings, of unhinged, almost like unreliable narrators in a way, right? Because Lee isn't aware of what happened in her own childhood, and like, so everything can slightly be taken with a pinch of salt, I think, right? Which again, I sort of love that about it. And yet at the same time, we don't need the kind of, psychiatrist laying everything out for us in a monologue at the end as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there we go. So where does it rank for you so far? Like, we're at the halfway point of the year. Not to suddenly drop you on the spot with what's your top 5 of the year, Becky, but is it your favourite of the year, or is there anything else that you've loved more?
Yeah, it is. This is my top horror of the year so far. So I gave it 4.5, and that was on first watch, and I did the same second watch. I think, like, people are making the natural, I suppose, comparison to films like Hereditary. Hereditary for me is 5 stars, no notes, perfect movie. Watch it time and time again. Like, it's it's in my top films of all time. Longlegs is close, doesn't quite tip over into the 5 stars for me, but I think it is exceptional, and I'm really delighted that I enjoyed it as much as I did after all of the anticipation and all of the hype, and after really wanting to like it and really wanting it to, like I say, like, it did for me what I wanted it to do really successfully. So this is up there. So it's probably Longlegs at the top, and then I saw the TV Glow. I really liked Immaculate. I really liked A Quiet Place Day One. I don't know what else would be in my top 5. That's my top 4. You can have 4.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's probably up there for me as well. Like, and I think, like, it's gonna be. I feel like we've not had a Hereditary in a while, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like this is gonna be the film that we will remember this year, like, kind of like Talk to Me was last year. I think this is going to be the one that come the end of the year, we're all still going to be talking about, and we are still going to remember, because even if I don't know, even if it doesn't turn out to be my favorite horror film of the year, I think it will be the scariest one. It's absolutely the one with the most, like, incredible, unique atmosphere that I felt in a very, very long time.
Definitely.
It's really something, and just the style of it, that, like you said, the sound design, the cinematography, just the vibe. I mean, what a vibe! Unbelievable, and unbelievable.
Also, I feel like with Talk to Me, like, I feel like I saw that quite early on in 2023, and then basically nothing topped it for the rest of the year. Like, there were films like When Evil Lurks, which came really close, but like,
that was great.
Talk to Me was just there from the sort of outset, and nothing really topped it. What's really nice about 2024 is that we've had Longlegs, and we've still got, like, Cuckoo,
Alien Romulus,
Nosferatu,
Oddity as well, which I've seen, which is maybe my fave. It's a bit more my bag, but I mean, just incredible. Yeah, we've still got a lot of, hopefully, really great stuff to come.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm very open for other films this year to come and top Longlegs for me. But yeah, like, I really loved it, so it will take something quite special.
Amazing. Better than The First Omen, then. On that note, Becky, thank you so much for joining me. What an absolute joy it's been to talk about this movie with you. I'm really excited to hear more people's thoughts. I'm excited to go see it a second time. And you'll be back again on the podcast very soon. But until then, let people know where they can find you, where they can find more of your work.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on to talk about it. I've really loved it. Yes, you can find me on socials at Bunny Darke. And if you follow me, if you sign up on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Bunny Darke, I put out some new exclusive writing for my patrons every couple of weeks. And I've actually got something coming up either this week or next week about Micah Monroe.
Oh.
So I'm doing a kind of look at her sort of modern scream queen standing. So yeah, you can sign up £5 and above to get access to that.
And just FYI, I feel like there's not enough people in the world that have seen Watcher. Go and watch Watcher as well, right?
God.
What a fucking scary film. Yeah.
So scary.
Yeah. Amazing. Becky, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
And there we go. That's it for our bonus Longlegs episode. Thank you so much for listening. One more time, a huge thank you to my brilliant guest, Becky Darke, and a big thank you to Oz Perkins for his time as well. So please do get in touch. I would love to hear from you all. What do you think of Longlegs? Does it live up to the hype for you? Please do get in touch. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can find us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, etc. And if you want to discuss this week's episode, if you want to discuss Longlegs with fellow listeners of the pod, you can join the Evolution of Horror discussion group on Facebook, or you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord. You can find this podcast in all the usual podcast platforms. We are part of the Evolution of Horror network. There is also our sister podcast available, The Detective and the Log Lady. That is a weekly Twin Peaks rewatch podcast that I am co-hosting with the brilliant Stacey Ponder, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back on Friday for another regular episode of the Evolution of Horror.